All right, everybody, welcome again to another OpenShift Commons briefing. As we do on Mondays, we have Ask Me Anything sessions with different upstream projects or community leaders. And so this week, we have brought together the team from ProjectQuay. We're going to get a little bit of an introduction from Daniel Nessier, and then we'll have it open for Q&A, and Tom McKay is going to lead the Q&A. But we have a number of folks here on the call from the engineering teams from Kwai and Clare, which are now part of ProjectQuay. So please queue up your questions in the chat, and we will gather them. If you're on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or in the Twitch stream, we'll aggregate them and bring them here as well. So ask where you live, and we'll see if we can get them all answered. So with that, Daniel, take it away. Give us a little intro to what ProjectQuay is and where we're at today.
Sure thing, Diane. Thank you very much for having us. Welcome to this brief overview of ProjectQuay, the upstream open source project. If you haven't heard about Kwai, here's a short little recap of the history of Kwai, which is pretty interesting. It was actually the first private registry on the internet, so it had the ability to store private or offer private container repositories even before the Docker registry and container index at the time had. And it was basically launched as a service, as a SaaS service with Kwai.io and an on-prem version of Kwai Enterprise by a company called DevTable, which was eventually acquired by CoreOS, which, as you all know, got incorporated into Red Hat. And since then, it's still an open source project, or has been open sourced after the fact, and is also an official Red Hat product. So Kwai as a technology and also as a SaaS offering has quite a history on its back, and it remains one of the most one of the largest and most busiest public registries next to Docker Hub, and it's also available as an on-prem version for enterprise customers or for upstream users to install in their own environments. Kwai as a project has been open source late last year, so we are actually not that long with the source code on GitHub and all the community collaboration behind that, but it's generated a significant and impressive track record already since then. The mission of the project is quite straightforward. Kwai is allowing you to build, store, secure, and distribute your applications in the form of containers reliably at scale. And there are two important things here, which is security as well as reliability at scale. And these aspects come from the fact that Kwai is an open source technology, runs the Kwai.io offering. In fact, all the code base is shared between the on-prem product and the Kwai.io offering, and all the new features go into Kwai.io first, right? So we basically test at the scale of Kwai.io with tens of thousands of users and hundreds of thousands of API requests each day before we actually release this into a product. But it's all coming from the GitHub open source project, and that's where the community now lives. So it's fully open source and available for various footprints, both including on-premise, public cloud, as well as various cloud service offerings. One interesting aspect of Kwai as a technology is that, given its history, that pretty much started at the same time when Docker started to become more widely adopted, is that it is one of the few registries that actually allows for a very broad range of Docker client compatibility. So we go all the way back to version 0.7. So you can also use Docker clients that even precede the V2 protocol implementation to use Kwai in order to pull and push images. But we're also looking at the new stuff, so we have our eyes and the ears all on all things OCI. We are basically already an OCI reference implementation with Kwai. We are giving people using Kwai early access to features like OCI MIME types, as well as OCI artifacts back. And maintainers of the Kwai project are actually part of that community body, right? If you were to sum up the strengths of Kwai as a project, is it's really about providing secure access to container images, which drive containerized application architectures and container orchestration platforms. It does that with performance and scalability in mind. Kwai is, again, one of the largest public registries available next to Docker Hub, and it focuses a lot of automation, so it's perfectly available and to integrate in CI/CD system. I said that Kwai itself was just open sourced more or less a little bit over half a year ago, but already since then we have seen quite an upstream of adoption. So Kwai is very active on GitHub, and so is Clare, which is actually the project that implemented security vulnerability scanning. So Clare is open source since a little bit longer than Kwai, and is also used outside of Kwai, but all the Clare maintainers are actually on the Kwai project, and they're also on this call today. So if you have any questions for Clare, please do bring those up as well. So what's new in ProjectQuay? If you haven't been following, let's do a quick recap of the most recent release, which we introduced a couple of weeks ago, Kway 3.3, where we put a major focus on completely overhauling Clare effectively and introducing the result as Clare before in tech preview with Kway 3.3. So Clare before predominantly adds support for programming language packages to do vulnerability analysis. So Clare always had the ability to check the operating system package managers for vulnerabilities and use the signature databases to tag images that have known vulnerabilities, including the severity and some information about how to fix them. But on top of that, we are starting to add support for popular package managers for programming languages. First one actually for V4 is Python. The other big theme is that we see close integration with the OpenShift and OKD platform, so that if you run Kway with this platform or even on this platform, you have a first-class user experience. And that's enabled by various operators, and one of them is the bridge operator, which got introduced as a supported feature with Kway 3.3, and is also making its way into the official repository. This gives you tight integration for workflows between OpenShift and Kway, so that things like namespaces and repositories or service account tokens, robot tokens are kept in sync, that you automatically have permissions to push and pull to your little carve of the world in Kway from OpenShift. And you can also use image streams and OpenShift builds in conjunction with Kway and get the familiar user experience that you had with the internal registries. We also added a couple of smaller improvements across the board. Things like LDAP filtering help users with that kind of authentication backend to be more precise about which users they want to see in Kway. We have some features that actually trigger down from Kway.io, like forwarding larger volumes of logging data to Elasticsearch. And we are also introducing some experimental features. One of them is Helm v3 chart support, which is based on the OCI artifact spec. So if you enable two experimental flags, one on the Helm side and one on the Kway side, you can actually also use Kway to push and pull Helm charts as well. Quick update on what's going to be the focus for near, mid, and long-term future. In general, as Kway now being an upstream community project, we have the same open source upstream driven innovation model that all Red Hat projects have. So we are really looking for feedback like these kind of AMA sessions from you in order to get ideas on what we can improve, where we can add in terms of integrations and features throughout the product, and then start making those available on Kway.io in a canary fashion, and then make them available to the paying customers with the productized version of Kway. Going forward, we pursue three main focus areas. One is that we want to get closer to the platform we are running on, and the platform we are most likely to get used with a lot, which is OKD upstream or OCP downstream. So there's a lot of potential for very close integration in the developer workflow as well as administrative workflow to know about events regarding container images that happen in Kwai, for those to be able to trickle down into OpenShift. So we want to make these things much more visible and much more useful to users, so they have a very natural workflow between these two projects. In general, focus on day two operations of actually running Kwai on top of Kubernetes and on top of OpenShift is a big focus in the future too. We are essentially rewriting the Kwai operator, which was formerly known as the Kwai setup operator, to be much more future-proof for enhancements, and also gets the ability to not only install Kwai, but to keep it updated through its life cycle. And then the third part is enhancements to the registry itself, as well as to Clare. So on the Clare side, we definitely want to add more package managers from programming languages in the future in order to increase the coverage of security scanning of images. We want to finalize MIME type support, as well as OCA artifact support, as well as then enhance some of the more advanced features in Kwai, like repo mirroring. This is the more detailed roadmap. I'm not going to talk to every point here, but one thing that we are currently working on quite intensely is actually updating the Kwai code base to be Python v3 compatible. So that's going to take up most of the bandwidth on the Kwai team for the upcoming 3.4 release towards the end of the year. And at the same time, we are also redesigning the Kwai operator with the main goals that it can actually manage Kwai in spite of updates, and it can also provide the required databases in a useful fashion to Kwai. We are also looking to add builder support for OCP. This just closely missed the last merge window, but it's going to be in 3.4. Clare v4 has two big goals. One is notifications, which is going to be rewritten from scratch as well, as part of Clare v4 being a completely new code base, and also having the ability to get vulnerability data from different sources, which is primarily driving the air-gapped deployment case. So if you want to run Clare in a disconnected environment with no network access, you need some sort of mechanism to constantly feed updates to the vulnerability database, and that's what Clare v4 at GA will deliver. I think I want to leave it at that in terms of an outlook and open it up for Q&A.
Great. Well, thank you for the update. A couple of other things have popped in. One, I just wanted to make just be clear about what the difference was between the Kwai bridge operator and the ProjectQuay operator that's in operatorhub.io. Someone want to address that just quickly?
Yeah, sure. So the Kwai operator in operatorhub.io is really the operator that maintains Kwai itself, right? So that's the operator that basically gives you a Kwai deployment as a service. And we just call it Kwai operator these days, even though we used to call it Kwai setup operator. But it's really the component that is responsible for the lifecycle of Kwai on a Kubernetes cluster, right? The Kwai bridge operator was specifically created to integrate and running Kwai instance with OpenShift clusters. OpenShift also comes with an integrated registry and has some extensions that are only available with the integrated registry by default. And the bridge operator opens this up to be used with Kwai as well. So the most predominant features here are support for image streams, as well as automated deployments when builds in Kwai have produced a new image artifact. So one operator you use to install Kwai, the other is to integrate it with OpenShift.
Okay, and then Mohan asked from the YouTube channel, in Kwai 3.3 for LDAP, will it be possible to control the level of nesting groups?
I don't think we have that ability right now. I have seen the RFE for that, but maybe someone from the engineering team can provide more background.
So yeah, there is this is Tom McKay. There is a JIRA issue where we track our issues upstream and downstream for that feature. It is not on our list of things to do in the coming months, but it has been asked by a number of people, so it has not gone unnoticed, but I wouldn't expect it certainly not the 3.3, which is in ZStream right now, and probably not the next release 3.4, which we are actively working on currently.
And Waleed is asking, would it be possible to abstract the Mira pass-through for developers on-prem? That is, a developer asks for an image in pod manifest, OpenShift, Kubernetes, will pass it to Kwai on-prem. If not there, it pulls out of the internet from Kwai.io or any other container registries. And I'm going to unmute Waleed so he can follow up on this too. But is there a quick answer to that?
Maybe Daniels can correct me, but I don't think that doing a pull-through cache like that is not on our short-term plans.
Waleed, did I get that right? I just unmuted you if you want to.
Yeah, to supplement that, it's something that we have been thinking about, but it's not scheduled for the next release. But it's something we are tracking and we are aware of. And yeah, definitely coming in from multiple angles.
Well, he couldn't unmute himself. Sorry about that. The gentleman on YouTube asked a follow-up question, LDAP question. In Teams and membership directory synchronization, will it be possible to add multiple LDAP groups?
So Joey, do you remember what the current level of feature in LDAP is?
What do you mean by the current level of feature?
Well, I mean, I remember I can add multiple search terms. I don't know the LDAP terms.
Right now, you can only bind a team to a single LDAP group. Nothing in theory would preclude us from checking multiple groups, but it is not currently a feature. It's a request. We'd have to add it onto the roadmap.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if you're the questioner, definitely open a JIRA issue with as much details as you can, and we'll give it a look.
Right. So Waleed had an earlier question at the very beginning of the whole conversation. He queued up one on restricted network air-gapped environments and support updates to vulnerability scanners databases via periodic updates, allowing other scanners other than Clare. I think that's like a bunch of questions mashed into one. But you want to tease that out there, Tom, and figure out?
I can answer that. The vulnerability updates for AirGap are a plan for Clare v4. Clare v4 is targeted for October to come into GA. As part of that, it is being designed explicitly for the idea that you would be able to load in the updates as opposed to today where it's expected that Clare can download those updates. As for different security scanners, nothing in Kwai is Clare specific. Any security scanner that speaks the current or upcoming, their different version of the Kwai security scanner API, of which today it's Clare v2 for the current one and Clare v4 for the upcoming, can be used with Kwai without any additional configuration on the Kwai side. You just point it to the security scanner. There just has not been any community agreement yet on what a registry security scanner API should look like. So every registry today has a different API, but there has been some work done by various external security scanner providers to integrate with Clare's API. I believe, in fact, one provider has a working prototype of a small proxy server that actually will let Kwai talk to their security scanner. I don't recall what it's called at the moment, though, so I don't want to answer incorrectly. But nothing precludes anyone from using a different security scanner with Kwai today, except for API compatibility on the security scanner side, and that can be done via shim.
So there's one follow-up question. Which other scanners use the Clare API?
As I said today, as far as I know, there was one security scanner that had a shim prototype, but I don't know off the top of my head what it's called. None of the other ones do today. Nothing precludes them from doing so. It's just no one has gotten around to doing it. It's also not complicated at all. The Kwai Security Scanner API is very, very simple.
And before we go to more questions, Diane, maybe I can share the slide deck, or who's sharing now?
Daniel is, but you can just take it away from him.
Okay. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. And you'll notice Daniel's slides were red and mine are blue, the ProjectQuay color. I think you would call me the community champion for ProjectQuay. And I just wanted to point out real quickly, these are great questions. We do have an email list. It's a Google group, Kwai-SIG. And we are on Freenode IRC. I know there's a lot of chat tools out there, Slack and Discord, and but with all of them, IRC seems the one that lives the longest. And then again, as mentioned, we do have the GitHub organization. So the majority of our repos are under the Kwai org. There is one, the Kwai operator, which is the Kwai setup operator. That's still in a Red Hat community of practice repo, but that'll be moving over to Kwai as well. So feel free to explore there. And the repos have varying policies in terms of issues. So for example, the Clare repo, the Clare community communicates most frequently through GitHub issues. We do not have GitHub issues enabled on most of our Kwai specific repos. Instead, we use issue tracking through JIRA, which I linked there as well. We use the same tracking for both upstream, so ProjectQuay, and downstream Red Hat Kwai. And so if you want to really see the roadmap and what's being worked on actively, it's all there for you to look at. And again, all of our code that is for Red Hat Kwai, as well as Kwai.io, as well as ProjectQuay, all lives upstream and is accessible on the various branches if you want to check it out. The upstream release pattern is that we release every sprint, which is 3 weeks for us. And which leads me to our next thing. So the master branch of ProjectQuay, we are converting from Python 2 to Python 3, which is a significant amount of work, if anyone is familiar with Python. But we're in the benefit that we do have an extensive both internal Red Hat QE team, as well as extensive unit tests and integration tests. So the largest portion of the conversion is really checking the updated package versions. So where in Python 2, we might be using an older version of an integration package. We've updated that. So, and as you can see, there's a lot of integration points. So LDAP, all the storage engines, all sorts of flavors of things. There's a lot to be tested and reviewed. And we'll put this in the top of the README, information about our bug bash here and the rewards for our community's hard work in helping us with this. But we hope to see you on IRC and on the email list and fixing and raising issues.
It's a significant effort to do this, so any and all help is much appreciated. We'll socialize this a little bit too as well. And I think Bill Diedelbach has got a t-shirt design up his sleeve as a reward, so hopefully we can showcase that too sometime soon and tempt you all to use your Python skills and help us out here, because that's really where the community's at. The other piece of information, if you don't know too as well, we've got an effort on to bring ProjectQuay to the CNCF and have made a pull request and are working our way through the Cloud Native Computing Foundation's review process for bringing a project into incubation. So that's been in the works for a while, and it's wandering its way through some SIG reviews. But I'll put in the chat the link to the pull request. If you're interested in following through or commenting on that, please let us know, or just do so. And we'd be happy to have your support and also your feedback on that process as well. So that's where we're at with the CNCF at the moment. And hopefully you'll see us on that beautifully complex CNCF landscape.io diagram sometime in the not too distant future. That'll also help raise visibility for this project and also give us lots more options.
And so I do want to take a moment and have either Lewis or Hank, either one of you are welcome, but sort of tell us why there is a Clare v4. So as we know, Clare v2 is the version that's out there now integrated with Red Hat Kwai. If you use Kwai built from the master branch or one of our recent sprint releases, there is an option to enable v4. And in fact, on the master branch now, the Clare v4 is the default. So Lewis or Hank, which of you want to tell me a little bit about why there's a Clare v4?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Clare v4 is a reimagination of Clare v2's original architecture. There were some issues with the original architecture, which we addressed most of them, evolving around performance. And there was also some data model issues, which didn't allow us to really connect the dots between certain package types like binary and source. All this is now built into the data model. And in the performance side, we really looked at basically how Clare v2 was pulling down images, how it was analyzing them, did most of the work in memory. We moved that to actually be buffered on disk, which will actually wind up being more performant because some of these layers can get rather large. You don't want to do all that work in memory. And then we basically re-architected the actual library, which does most of the work, into a repository called Clare Core. That was for an effort to remodel and also to kind of promote easier integration, easier contribution from the community. So you can actually take a look at that in Clare Core. We have had some outside contributions. Everything is well documented now, and it should be a little bit easier to just jump in and add things to the code base. It's a little bit more difficult in Clare v2. And there's a couple other things. Clare v2 didn't really consider content addressable layers and artifacts. Content addressability is the fact that if I have a hash for an object, it will always reference that object. So we made that a first-class citizen in order to really fortify the reduction of work that Clare has to do when performing the scanning on the same images and same layers. That's a first-class citizen that got brought into the Docker specifications after image IDs. So it's not like Clare v2 ignored that; it just wasn't a thing at that point. So we kind of worked that into the solution. Yeah, there's quite a bit that has changed, mostly from taking a look at Clare v2. When Clare v2 was developed, it was developed at the onset of a lot of those technologies. So it benefits us a lot to take a.
Can you tell me a bit about the? I know in Clare v4 there's now language support. What does that mean?
Yeah, so there's nothing stopping us from kind of the new architecture jumps into basically being able to scan anything off the file system itself. So now that we kind of set up this layout, we were able to implement Python scanning fairly easily, and more language packages will come. But yeah, we basically just have a core set of components that when they're implemented, they just kind of fall into the order of the application. So doing that for Python, doing that for pip, it all becomes fairly imaginable with not too much code changes, which is what we kind of wanted to accomplish. So right now we support Python and pip scanning. We're working through two rather big features, air gap and notifications. And I hope that once we get through those, then we will be able to attack more of the language package scanning. It's actually one of the things I'm more excited about. I think it can add a lot to the solution. So I want to, as soon as possible, whether it comes from contribution or not, I think that it should be like, like a major point on our radar.
Nice. And as a reminder, again, we build upstream community releases every 3 weeks, and that includes Clare v4. So if you are not wanting to build the image yourself, we provide those every 3 weeks. So Diane, any more questions for us?
Not at the moment. I'm wondering if we can get some more insights into the roadmap from Joey and from the others and Lewis.
Well, again, our focus is for the coming summer months, really the Python 3 work in Kwai itself, and then Clare v4, all of its nice features, and then really focusing on what we're internally calling the next generation Kwai operator. And maybe if Alec is on. Alec, are you with us today?
I don't think he is on.
Okay, so Alec is our lead engineer on the Kwai operator. The current version of the Kwai setup operator was written in conjunction with Red Hat Consulting and a customer. And they graciously allowed it to be open source work. And that's what's shipped now with 3.3, with the Red Hat Kwai 3.3. There is work in re-architecting that to be more operator-like. And that repo, again, exists up on our GitHub. There's some backend tooling we're using called Customize. It's very Kubernetes friendly. So there's a lot of work going on there. One, to make sure the transition from the existing operator to the new next generation operator goes smoothly, but also to ensure that we capture all the user personas that we envision. And this really is focused on the day 2 operations as well. So the current operator really installs, but doesn't further manage. But we're looking to raise the maturity level of the operator to include things like upgrades and day 2 operations. So that really is the roadmap for our team.
So there was something on the roadmap that Daniel put up there around extending the operator to support databases. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what that means, and maybe Daniel can throw the roadmap picture back up and we can talk about some of those things.
Sure, I can unshare. Daniel, if you want to share.
Yeah, I'm going to take over real quick. So I think you're referring to the 3rd and 4th bullet point of the Kwai roadmap. So like Tom mentioned, today the operator actually deploys Kwai, and it can actually also deploy all the immediate dependencies of Kwai, which is an in-memory cache based on Redis, as well as a SQL database that is either MySQL or Postgres. So we deployed Postgres today with the operator. So we want to make that a little bit more, let's say, opinionated. So it becomes, on the one hand, less customizable, but also more maintainable for us. So the more options we give people in order to obviously change the way Kwai is deployed by the operator, the more complex the operator code obviously gets, right? And complexity is the enemy of all updates, right? So if we really want to go into a world where a Kwai operator is essentially like Kwai is a service running wherever your Kubernetes cluster is running, we need to have very robust update capabilities. And that may actually include updating not only Kwai itself, but also the version of Redis that we are using, or the version of Postgres that we're using in order to enable certain new features, right? So in order to do that with the operator and live up to the expectation of the operator actually giving you a robust Kwai deployment and maintaining that over time, we are looking at scoping down the way you can actually deploy the database with Kwai to something that is easier to incorporate by the operator. So that's all in order to help the operator to be able to manage update lifecycle, so that when you have Kwai 3.4 installed and Kwai 3.5 is released, you can actually use the operator to just change a little version spec in the custom resource, and then the Kwai operator will notice that and will actually take over reconciling your release and updating it in the way we are doing Kwai updates. So that whole orchestration is basically taken out of your hands and done automatically with all safeguards in place, less potential for human errors. And that may basically mean that what you can customize in terms of the database getting deployed is a little bit reduced in order to make that a robust experience. But of course, we still have the ability to have you provide a database for us, or use a managed database if you're in a cloud environment, and that will remain available. So that's just a bigger or part of a bigger plan to make the operator really capable of these day two operations that we're looking for, so that you can really just solely rely on your operator to not only install but also update your Kwai deployment.
Cool, thanks. We have another question came in and asking if you could elaborate more on the repo organization team level structure. Can it be more flexible, more levels? He's a new user and he finds it limiting. For example, how should I provide to my end users the images from upstream Kwai.io CoreOS, such as Clare and Kwai?
Yeah, so right now, the hierarchy, the levels that you can have in a name are limited to that. So organization and repo, and then your tags. So in terms of flexibility, yeah, that's the flexibility you're stuck with. Does that answer your question?
I know he's basically, it's not flexible at all, is what he's saying. So
yeah,
it doesn't sound really flexible either. So, but that's
so the schema, the spec does allow for multi-levels of hierarchy in names. There aren't a lot of registries. I can't think of one off the top of my head that supports a number of levels. So we do not at this time.
I'll comment on that a little further. The reason we don't support it at this time is because it's not supported in the Docker v1 protocol, and as part of our commitment to full backwards and forwards compatibility, we can't support it. If and when we formally deprecate version 1 of the protocol, which will likely happen at some point in the future because its usage has been dropping, then we can investigate adding hierarchical support. But we will likely not, unless something changes, we will likely not be allowing you to set permissions at different levels of the hierarchy. It will be a naming convention. Which is what, in fact, most custom implementations that do have quote unquote hierarchy actually do. In terms of how to allow customers to access things, the current promoted solution is you create a robot account per customer, or if you don't have a problem with sharing the robot, credentials, you give one robot account to all your customers, and you just give permissions to that robot account in the particular set of repositories that the customer will have access to. So we ourselves actually used to do this at CoreOS, and it worked really well. And it was really easy to track as well, since we did a robot account per customer. So we would just, as those customers would sign up for products, our account system would just add that user's robot via the Kwai API to the particular set of repositories that contain that product. or rather that form that product. And then if their subscription lapsed, same deal, we would remove the robot, and then Kwai's permission model will take it from there. The other benefit of using a robot account as well is that it means that the users don't have access to the Kwai UI even to see things. And so it's purely a pull robot, and it's a credential. So they can't just use it for other things. It's tied specifically to your organization.
Right. So Waleed, I take it you haven't figured out how to unmute yourself. So you can't follow up to that, but if you do, let us know and we'll get you in. Yeah, he's already tried. There's a bug in the system. There's a bug in the matrix. So there was one other question or ask for a little bit more on builders on OCP and what that entangles. Or
I can take
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Bill Dettelbach. I'm the engineering manager for Kwai. Yeah, just I think that's one of the things we didn't talk about too much, but I think it's a feature that we've got slated for the next minor release for 3.4. A lot of folks who use Kwai on premise don't realize that there's actually a facility for builds. If you use Kwai.io, you're probably very familiar with it. We don't have too much uptake. Folks running Kwai in-house with the builders. Some of that I think is because the setup has been somewhat manual. It wasn't really designed up front to work directly on Kubernetes. Actually, the builders are the first thing we moved over to Kubernetes when we started to retarget Kwai.io over to OpenShift. We've been running the builders now on OpenShift for about 8 months or so, and so we decided that it was time to productize that, bring that back into the product. So with the next major release, you'll be able to run the builders now pretty easily on top of a Kubernetes orchestrator. We've done some internal changes in conjunction with the Python 3 migration as well. We've taken the opportunity to obviously update the build manager code in the Kwai container to Python 3, and while we've got the hood up on the car, we're swapping out some stuff like an old RPC framework that we used before for gRPC, and we're trying to simplify the code as much as possible. We're also bumping up the version of the VM that we use for the actual builds inside the pods to a more supported version. It was on container Linux. We're moving that over to Fedora Core OS, I believe. So anyway, I thought it would be worth to just call that out as a new feature. I think with the introduction of builders on OCP and Kubernetes, it should be very simple to stand those up as a new build facility for on-prem customers. So, and if there's detailed questions on that, I see Kenny's on. Kenny's actually doing the work, so I will defer the hard questions to him.
Kenny there? And if so, I apologize for here. Here you go, Kenny. You have something to add. I think we're having some difficulties with the mute and unmute button today, so it's a little quieter than it should be on this call. So there you go. Well, then hopefully by 2022, we'll be changing the vulnerability whitelisting to either whatever the new standard terminology is for whitelisting, and have it be allow listing or deny listing or whatever comes up in the nomenclature.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
One interesting aspect of builders is that once you think about this being something that's available on premise, and you deploy Kwai on something like OpenShift or OKD, you get to see how the ecosystem comes together in a larger picture, right? So you may have heard about a upstream project called Tekton, which provides a Kubernetes native experience to running continuous delivery. And in that construct of Tekton, you have abstract concepts of tasks, groups of tasks building a pipeline, right? So you could easily see that this ties back into the builder concept of Kwai, which allows you to actually build container image artifacts based on external triggers, either via the API or by integration with source code management systems, right? So that in turn, in the long run, Kwai could use something like Tecton to actually carry out this task and use another Kubernetes service to describe how that's going to happen, right? So I think there are some really interesting opportunities there in the future as these services are maturing. And you may know that our group here at Red Hat is also very invested in the Tecton project upstream.
Someone had also asked if there was a deep dive on Clare Core available from a past Commons briefing, and I don't have one yet, so we'll probably have to get Lewis and someone to do that deep dive on Clare Core sooner than later, if that's if you're willing.
Yeah, if you want just something to hold you over, there's a repository. I'll put the link in the chat too, but we have worked on basically formal documentation in the Clare Core repository. It's a little bit more of like an upstream resource, but it does carry a lot of weight as far as explaining how everything works. So I'll put that into the chat.
All right, I'll share it via the screen. So if great. So in terms of Clare and community contribution, what are you looking for, Lewis, in the short term and long term for people to give you feedback on or to help you with?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that come to mind, like we had some great contributions from VMware who added their own OS support. Language support would be great. I think that any contributions, even knowledge share contributions around security protocols, around how organizations kind of package their applications internally is all really great stuff that we can benefit from. But yeah, as far as like code contributions, I know language packaging is going to be a really big focus coming up, and having some individuals who have worked, really closely and maybe, the Maven space, the NPM space, the pip space would be really beneficial to us.
And do you have a reoccurring community meeting at all yet for Clare?
We don't have a community meeting as of right now. We do a lot of collaboration over Slack right now, but it's something that, I think as we are going forward, it's becoming more and more crucial to do. So we might want to put something together for that.
Yeah, I think that when the transition hopefully takes place over to the CNCF, we'll probably get that done. And then there's the Clare Core link. Thank you. But I think that we do have that SIG page for ProjectQuay, and if you want to share that again, Tom, and that would be great. And we'll add the Clare little bit here to that as well. So to trying to figure out, how to best onboard new community contributors and folks like that. I think the Bug Bash, which we're setting up, is actually a really good way to get started and to start getting yourselves involved in the community if you're interested, and if there's features that are missing, or if there's a feature way down that product roadmap, definitely make sure that you highlight that in your feedback, and that might move things forward. But also volunteering to help contribute on any of these things, please do. All right, and Hank's we're having some unmute issues here. There you go, Hank. Go for it. Try that, Hank. All right, we still can't hear Hank. We're having some serious unmute stuff. All right.
Another thing that I often get asked about is support for image signing in Kwai, especially since Kwai.io has that ability built in. And that's a very interesting discussion, because we are actually involved in some of the community work that is revolving around making that available in the Kwai project as well. I know that Joey's working actively on this upstream with the community around Notary, and maybe Joey, you can give a quick update on where this is currently at.
Sure. So Kwai.io has experimental support for Docker Notary, which was the original signing solution that the community developed, or Docker developed, and then the community sort of accepted. However, over the last few years, there's been a lot of community discussion about the pitfalls and problems associated with Docker Notary. And to that end, the community is currently working on a new version of Notary called Notary V2. It's a working group. There's actually a community meeting in, I think, 8 minutes that meets weekly. So anyone who's interested, feel free to go search out the Notary V2 working group and take a look. But the high level description is basically, because of this recognition that there needs to be something better, the community is working on something new. And so as a result, we are part of that working group. And as soon as the working group comes up with a proposal and an implementation for that proposal, then we will be working to adopt that. But as of this moment in time, it's still very much in the development phase. And so given that and the lack of universal adoption of the original Docker Notary, we're taking the approach of let's contribute to the new version as opposed to adopting a flawed older version. So that's the high level description. It means, unfortunately, that we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to get a really good solution in place. But since the whole community has finally recognized that this is something we should do, I'm pretty confident and excited about the direction that everyone's going.
Thanks, Joey.
Yeah.
So let me just touch on the ways to contact us. Again, as you've seen, we're new to being open source, and part of that growth pattern is figuring out the best way to collaborate with our community. And right now, Clare has a community. As I said, it does a lot of its discussions through the GitHub issues. We are hoping that over time we can sort of consolidate the communities with Kwai and Clare. So, Clare questions are completely fine. Any operator questions are completely fine on the Kwai SIG. The issue tracking, the JIRA that we use is for both projects, both Kwai, Clare, as well as all the operators. So if work gets done, even if there's an issue upstream, it'll often be recreated as a JIRA. And yeah, so there is a Clare channel on Freenode as well. Both the Clare and Kwai channels on IRC are very lightly populated. I would encourage you to use the Kwai one, which is why I listed it as the only one, just to sort of get everyone in the same room, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ask a question on the IRC, for sure it'll get attention if you put an email to the Kwai SIG, either for Clare or Kwai or any of the other projects, it'll get seen as well.
Okay. Well, there's one question coming in from one of the channels, external streaming channels, is enhanced content coverage included in SCAP compliance scan like standalone OSCAP Podman? Anyone have an answer to that one?
Does that make sense to you, Daniel?
I think I get the direction there. And the answer is no. We're pursuing a different standard for getting enhanced content coverage in. So we're basically looking at our overall V2 feeds as well as CVRF data to get a more comprehensive coverage on specifically now what is described in vulnerabilities for Red Hat RPMs, and that's beyond the Red Hat server RPM repository. So we're going a different route and using a different standard for that, not SCAP or OpenSCAP.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions out there, and I know you have another call in like 4 minutes. So we'll try, and if you can slide to that bug bash slide one more time and make it full screen, Thomas. And then we'll end on that, inviting everybody to join us for this bug bash. Also, bear with us as we make our way through becoming a true open source project, and any feedback or collaborations that you'd like to do, please reach out through the SIG and IRC on Kwai, and we'll hopefully get back to you really quickly. If not, ping us and repeatedly and hit us over the head, because we definitely want the community feedback and your participation in that. And this bug bash is one way to do that. So please do join us again, and we will hopefully see you in the CNCF world, not in a not too distant future. Any last words, Thomas or Bill?